Welcome to the What is Smart podcast. I'm Garrett Wilhelm, founder of the Gardens Foundation, and our mission is to do the real work it takes to change the way education looks and feels for learners. We have been embedded in a system for too long that is no longer relevant. Join us as we speak to world thought leaders on the subject of what is smart. Hello, everybody. My name is Garrett Wilhelm, and welcome to the What is Smart podcast. You guys have joined us for so many other episodes, learning a little bit about what is smart from some amazing people from across the world. And today is no different. My friends, I have an amazing guest today. She hails out of Texas, working at Texas Tech University. Her name is Dr. Heather Greenhalgh-Spencer. She's an associate dean in the Texas Tech University Graduate School and an associate professor in curriculum and instruction. Her research emerges at the intersection of educational technology, pedagogical innovation, personalized learning, engagement, and global uses of technology in STEM, all things this podcast loves. Greenhalgh-Spencer explores practices of using technology and pedagogical innovation to create engaged learning in both formal and informal learning spaces and in both national and global contexts. She explores issues in the STEM pipeline and also researches embodied and transdisciplinary learning practices that increase engagement for all populations in STEM courses. She researches blended personalized learning and the ways that blended learning or personalized learning can create diverse pathways and increased opportunities for all students. This has most recently translated into an increased focus on teacher retention, thank God, and student support in areas where teacher turnover is an issue. I got it all in, Heather. Was there anything you wanted to add to that?
Nope, that's about it. It's personalized
Awesome.
learning and that focus on that interaction.
Yeah, and thank you so much for joining us here on What is Smart. It's always really important for us to get a broad spectrum of people's opinions and people's looks at that question. But before we get into that, if you could tell us after that amazing intro, I always like to learn a little bit of the origin story of how you, Heather, got into education first and then got into a very specialized area of education in blended learning and personalized learning.
Well, there are many stories, right? I think lots of people have many stories that kind of foment the pathway, the journey that they are on in education. But I'll tell you one that really kind of was the background of my interest in personalized learning. When I first started as a brand new teacher in high school, I worked in a very rural mining town and brand new. I think I was 21. I graduated early and I remember lots of things, but one of the things I remember most was feeling like, I've gone through my teacher preparation program. I have some experiences behind me, and yet here I am confronted with enormous discrepancies in income. We had students who were very poor. We had students whose parents were in prison. We had students who did not know where their next meal was going to come from. We also had a couple of families who were rich. We had those kind of power dynamics and those different access points to resources. But I also remember thinking, it's dumb to be in a situation where I have to teach a curriculum and I have to teach it the same way to everyone. I could see that there were some students that were 2, maybe even 3 grade levels behind. They didn't have the reading skills, they didn't have the knowledge and content area. They were struggling, and I could even see in their faces this sort of sense of, why am I even here? This curriculum is, not at all interesting to me, because basically they didn't have the background to understand it. And on the other hand, I had a few students who were bored. Were like, why would I do this? I already did this 2 years ago. I'm doing this at the camp that I'm going to in the summer. And and I struggled to figure out, okay, well, what do I do? And I'd learned about differentiation. It's not like I was, completely unprepared, but I struggled with the amount of time it was taking to try and do all of the differentiation that needed to happen while also being a brand new teacher trying to learn the curriculum materials myself. Because as you may know, it's not just content knowledge that comes into play, but it's literally knowledge about how to read curriculum and then take that curriculum and turn them into learning activities for your students. And so, and if you're in a rural district, you know this, you are not just a teacher. I was, JV cheer coach and, a club, and, I was at that school from 5:30 in the morning until 7:30 in the evening. And that was, if the game didn't go until 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. So I had very
Jeez.
little time, a real desire to differentiate, a real understanding that there was a problem, and I struggled. And so when I, fast forward about a decade, and by then well, yeah, about a decade, I had started working at Texas Tech, and I came with a Montessori background, with this background and really a focus on differentiation and a focus on technology enhanced learning. That was something that I had done my PhD on. And I started to hear about this idea of personalized learning, but it was all focused on just technology. And I remember going and visiting a few classrooms, and I just thought, well, hey, that's wonderful because the technology helps with the time issue that I'd experienced as a young teacher. And yet, I also saw that this could easily, unless the teachers were trained as well, this could easily turn into nothing more than a sit and get with an iPad or a Chromebook rather than a sit and get with the teacher, blasting stuff at you. Really personalized learning has its most, its biggest increase in scores and engagement and really making a difference when it's a combination of focus on student agency, focus on data-driven instruction. It has to do with what the teacher can do to really leverage the differentiation they already know how to do, leverage the data literacy that they already have, but with the technology that enables some of that quickness that if you didn't have it would just take so much time. Teachers would become overwhelmed. And so being able to see a pathway to bring all of these things together, the machine learning driven technology that adapts to a student's needs, as well as training teachers in those data literacy practices, data driven instruction, student agency practices, really is what started me on my current journey, really focusing on ways that we can support our teachers who then in turn support our students with personalized learning.
Boom. I want everybody to understand that the work that you're doing right now is the work, right? Is the work in the sense of, we at my nonprofit, the Gardens Foundation, see it as defining what a future learner looks like, and then immediately after that, going into how do we develop teacher training programs to do exactly what you're saying. Because I personally realized the same things as we were working with Alt School, which is this tech, this beautiful tech where I was like, oh my God, this is going to be fundamentally game changing. However, what the challenge was there was developing the teacher data literacy, as you
Yep.
put it, that understanding of, yes, these tools are phenomenal, but they're only phenomenal if you learn to use them correctly,
Yep.
or if you learn to use them in a way that does exactly what you said, saves you time. Because I think honestly, anyone uses tech tools or any tools differently, right? Like there's some kind of subjectivity, if you will, in how you're adopting these tools into your classroom. But ultimately, that's been the biggest point of failure in
Yep.
introducing new tech tools, as you know. So what is the solution there? What is a solution, let's say, in training teachers? Because, I talked with Dr. Damian Bevel, and he said something really profound, which was, we add things to kids' experience, but we very rarely take things away, right? So there's all these new tech tools that are crammed into student learning and teacher learning. But I think the overall biggest challenge, like I had mentioned before, is like, what are these tools if one, we're not showing them how, them meaning teachers, how it saves people time. And then two, if someone doesn't have a foundation of understanding around technology, you could have someone implementing amazing personalized learning tools in one classroom and literally next door someone teaching 30 years ago way, dictating that this is the way that things to be done. And kids these days,
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
what is a solution that you've come upon in your research and work over at Texas Tech?
Sure, absolutely. Well, I'll answer that question in two ways, and really great questions, really great insights there, by the way. Thank you for that.
Of
Um,
course.
One of the things that we know actually from the research is if personalized learning is nothing more than kids, the intervention is nothing more than the addition of machine learning driven technology. It does not make the changes we want to see. And I want to be clear, there are still great things about that, right? Like it's wonderful that we can have technology come in and a student can sit down or a teacher can assign to the student lessons that really hit at where the student has needs right now, whether those needs are for intervention, they need more knowledge, they need more practice, or extension. They already have the content, they need more ways to explore, to get deeper or get broader into the knowledge content. That is wonderful. That is phenomenal. That is amazing that we have the technology to do that. So I want to still make sure that we are recognizing that that technology is amazing. But the research, and I'm thinking of two of the RAND studies, but there are even more recent ones than that, that really focused on exactly what you said. Let's look at different classrooms. And they actually said, not just let's look at classrooms that have personalized learning compared to those who don't. They said, let's look at different implementations of blended and personalized
Exactly.
learning. To be clear, though, those definitions are still kind of debated in the field, but the way I'm using it is personalized learning has to do with the personalization to the student. Blended is often the sort of pathway toward that personalization, where we're combining the uses of technology, but then also uses of the things like pedagogical strategies like station rotation or lab rotation or personalized playlists that we give to students. So both of those become important. But they found that really where you saw the greatest impact, so impacts in student learning outcomes, impacts in student engagement, and impacts in student retention, came down more to student agency practices. Did the student feel like they had some choice? Did the student feel like they had ownership of their own learning, as well as the data practices? When the teacher said, hey, this is the kind of station rotation we're going to do, hey, this is what I'm going to put on your playlist, Heather, as the student, it was based on data. It wasn't just this is what randomly comes to my mind, or this is what was on Teachers Pay Teachers and that was fascinating to me. It was based on the summative assessments like NWEA MAP or some of the ones
Hmm.
provided by states or districts, but also lots of formative assessments. This is what our entrance ticket or exit ticket said as we did the lessons, over the last few days, as we did other sorts of forms of formative assessment, learning journals, other things. This is what I, as the teacher, am seeing in the data, and therefore now that shapes what I will assign to the students. So even future research that I have done with actually several hundred teachers in Texas also said the same thing. They were asked about their perceptions of blended and personalized learning in the classroom. And that's one of the things that came up over and over again is I can see that my students are more excited. I can see that my students are more motivated, and it has translated into the test scores as well. And they too put it down not to just, yep, my student likes the technology, although that was important. But the bigger thing is my student feels like they are more motivated because they can see the growth for themselves as they, with the teacher, look at their data, understand for themselves, how do I learn best? What do I need to improve on? where can I go further? And what are the pathways that looks like
Mhm.
for me? And I think that's a really important thing. You also said something really important there about students learning to onboard and offload activities. And I do think that's important. I think that's one of the reasons why combining blended learning strategies with personalized is so important, because that helps students to do that. But one of the things that I've learned in my work with teachers is teachers also need to learn how to offload and onboard. Because if blended and personalized learning becomes an add-on to all of the stuff that they are already doing, it is not sustainable. The only way that this kind of new innovative, teaching strategies are sustainable is if teachers learn what to offload so they can learn more what to onboard. And we actually have classes at this on this at Texas Tech. We talk about the importance of, all right, what are some of the things that you can offload? Well, you used to do, hand grading of all of the worksheets that would come in. Technology can supplant that. You can have kids doing stuff on technology. The technology will grade it for you, literally put it into your grade book for you. So you don't have to sit and, I remember as a teacher, literally having some things that I would take from students, grade, and then sit there at a computer, putting in the scores into the grade book. Technology can do that. That is something that you can offload.
I was going to add too, sorry to interrupt you, but
Yeah.
in the exploration of kind of offloading, right? I see also an opportunity for deeper understanding of the tech tools in which you're implementing as such. I think part of that process is, personalized learning is, in my opinion, a pedagogical
Hmm.
approach.
Hmm.
And to understand the kind of meta structure of personalized learning helps to inform, from my practices in my schools, helps to inform, oh, exactly that moment. I don't have to do this. I don't have to grade. I don't have to use these bubbles anymore. That's what this is for. So please continue.
No, and that's exactly right. And I want to remind me, because that's a really good point, especially with the onboarding. But one of the other things we talk about is computer programs can also help you group your students.
Mm,
Because you've input all of the data, or the computer system has input data, the computer system can now say, here's the analysis of, these three kids would benefit from being grouped together to do this activity. These other three kids would benefit from being grouped together. So that's something that you can offload. One of the things you need to onboard, though, really focuses on those data literacy practices. And that's exactly, what you said there. And it's not just about understanding the technology, how to use it, but it's also understanding the affordances of the technology. And part of that really does come down to data literacy. We teach our teachers, and honestly our administrators, the importance of understanding the kind of data that you're getting, both from the software programs where it says, this is how many lessons so and so completed, or this is the probability of the student getting this kind of score on their next test. You as the teacher need to understand the calculations that are going on. I remember one time standing in a classroom. I was doing some observations, and some students were trying some different software. And one student was on this software that was trying to assess mastery through how many minutes the student took to get through the exercise. Because, right, software uses proxies all the time, right? And so the
hmm
theory of action of the software was, if the student takes 30 minutes to have done this assignment, correctly, then the student has less mastery than if the student had taken 20 minutes. And so you could see the software doing those calculations, in a slider bar. Student next to this student was also using a different software, doing a different activity. And this activity had to do with like grit. And so for this software, it was like, hey, the more a student struggles with the problem, the better, the more grit they have, So for one student, the longer they were taking on the problem, good. Another student,
Yeah.
the shorter they were taking, bad. And I sat there and thought, well, I'm standing in the classroom and I can see that students are just talking to each other. That's why students are taking long, because they're not spending the time doing the thing, but the software didn't know that. And so kids are talking, they're taking a long time, and kid on the one side is going to get a great score because they took so long struggling with this question. Kid on the other side is going to get a poor score because they took so long to do this mastery. And really, it had nothing to do with the problems they were supposed to be doing. It was the kids were talking. So teaching teachers how to understand the data, understand the assumptions built in within the technology, all of those are really important to get the teacher ready to then make those data-driven decisions, data-driven instruction, helping our students to then also look at their data and then make choices for how they should learn.
Because ultimately, and you're absolutely right, I think ultimately, if you're looking at the the tool as the control of the experiment, let's say, and there are so many variables to that tool being
Right,
exactly what you said, which is, well, you know, the tool doesn't what's the word, doesn't replace the fact that there are teachers still in classrooms really seeing
right,
what is going on. And ultimately, in that situation, I would look and say, well, maybe we look at, if the kids are engaged in that kind of stuff, or if they're just being kids, or if setting
right.
up the environment where they're all sitting and taking a test at once is the best solution for, really understanding where these kids are. But it sounds to me that one, your work is super fascinating because you get to pick apart tools that come in and then how they're implemented. And of course, what is the real outcome, which is the beginning of our research at the Gardens Foundation, is really
Mhm.
saying, like, we've got Johns Hopkins on board to work on a study to say, what do we know about assessment? What do we know about the tools that we're using in these classrooms? And are they really doing what they say they're going to
Yes.
do?
Yep.
And I'm
Mhm.
sure that there's so much alignment in what you're doing, and really saying, like, all right, well, this platform could be cool, this LMS could be cool, talking about playlists.
Mhm. Mhm.
Alt School had a playlist, Schoology has a playlist,
Yep.
like all of these different things. Okay, that's nice. But one, is it allowing for further retention and engagement and agency? One of the things I wrote down in my notes here is co-creation, right? Is
Mhm. Mhm.
co-created learning and how important that is. I'm wondering for you, when we're talking about co-creation, how do you develop teacher programming
Mhm.
that is co-created? That then, because as you know, I think a lot of what you're saying is, hey, the teachers have to really understand fully what they're implementing for it to be implemented appropriately. A lot of times, if it's a total shift in approach
Mhm.
pedagogically, that requires embodiment. That requires a
Yep.
feeling of that. So if you could talk to us a little bit about, like, how we get that done, like how do you guys get it done?
Absolutely. I'll I'll start by telling you the same thing that I tell the folks that come to our program, which is just to be clear, already the very fact that whether you're in, pre-K through 12, you're in a different environment than a university classroom. And some of those differences are come with lots of opportunities, and some of those differences come with challenges because blended and personalized learning focuses so much on data. One of the
Mm,
benefits from being in a PK through 12 environment is that you tend to have more access to data for the student simply because you have the students for a longer time, right? In a university classroom, your classes tend to last 15 to 16 weeks, sometimes less than that, sometimes 5 weeks. And they're a semester long, and then you move on. And so one of the better things about being in the PK through 12 area is just greater access to data. And I stress that with teachers, even while then I say, even though that's true, we want you to experience what personalized and blended learning looks like for you so that you can implement it in your classroom. So we start our very first class in our sequence with asking teachers or administrators, because actually I should be clear, I keep calling them teachers, but the truth is we have teachers that come to our program, we have instructional coaches that come to our program, we have administrators that come to our program, we have district folks that write curriculum that come to our program. People are coming not only with different backgrounds, background experiences, but different roles that then they want to, leverage blended and personalized learning in their roles in order to really make things better, whether they are leveraging blended and personalized learning as a teacher to help their students, or whether they're leveraging blended and personalized as an administrator or district leader in their work with teachers in their district or in their school. And so we start with a learner profile. And it is everything from tell us about some of your background experiences, tell us about your role, tell us about some of your learning preferences. We have a learner profile, and that learner profile goes with them among all of the blended and personalized learning classes. And we say that, hey, this is where this is going to be stored. You need to have a copy too, because you'll be asked for this as you transfer between classes in the program. But we want to know your learner profile because we leverage that learner profile as we're designing activities even for our learners who are these teachers and administrators. We also do a needs assessment, a learning analysis, where we say, here is our framework for best practices for blended and personalized learning, what the environment looks like, what we should be able to see students do, what we should be able to see teachers do, all of this kind of ecosystem for it. We want you to rate yourself. Where are you on each of these skills? And then we also want you to do something else. And this is important. We tell them this is important for your students or learners too. We want you to choose what you want to work on. You now can look at where you have needs. What skills and strategies do you want to get better at? Because that is going to feed into the activities that we do. And then throughout each class, we have a series of practice activities where we say we're going to try some strategies that have to do with blended and personalized learning. But then we say this will look different depending on how familiar you are with personalized learning as well as your role. If you are a principal, it's going to look different than if you are a second grade teacher. And so, but the strategies, like how to design a goal plan with your learner, that's a strategy that can be used for a 5-year-old, and it's a strategy that can be used for a 45-year-old. Coming up with a goal plan that feeds into the data-driven instruction practices. So we have these series of activities. We give them a reflection process and a kind of a protocol for doing the activities. We ask them to do the activities and record themselves doing these activities with their learners. And then we ask them to reflect on it. They upload all of those materials to a platform we use at Texas Tech, and faculty will then look at the videos and the reflections and also look at the learner profile as well as the skills that this particular learner was trying to work on and say, I am going to give you feedback kind of in general on this strategy, but I'm going to most hone in on these skills that you said you were going to work on, so I can give you personalized feedback. Additionally, we have peers also look at the videos and give feedback, because while faculty have a lens that I think is important,
It's always peers. It's
also
always
has that
peers.
really important
Yep.
lens. So those are kind of, throughout each of the personalized learning classrooms, that's kind of the practice and the cadence. We need to know your needs assessment. We need to know what you're working on. We need you to, at the end of the class, reflect back. Have you got better? Have you not? Like, what are your thoughts on it? We need you to practice. We need you to get personalized feedback. But those are the courses. And really, we have found that kind of personalization and hands-on job embedded work has really made a difference to our learners.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for the insight. I think one of the things you described is like, for them to be uploading documentation, you're creating a portfolio to display their learning, to which obviously we want that to be the way in which we display a child's learning or a learner's learning throughout school, is by, I always say, words are words, but what you can do is everything. And if you can explain what you've done and it provides an understanding or mastery of the concept in which you're learning, then who's to say? I mean, that's the world we're moving into, is a world where, for the same reason in leadership, I don't surround myself with yes people. I want to see if somebody can do it differently, and if that different way is better or more productive or more, I don't even know, more efficient. There's the word. Very, very, very cool stuff. So, how often you said you do a little research when it comes to when it comes to personalized learning. Are you in the classroom with learners still? You
Yes.
started your career, which we can all relate to, right? That are doing this kind of work. It always starts in the classroom somewhere. So now, flash to now, how often are you in classrooms seeing what's going on?
Multiple times per year, probably every other month, sometimes some months more than that. I visit classrooms because, um, okay, and let me, it's such a good question. With the types of research that I and my team do, there are some things that are not classroom based, things like surveys, right? Like, large scale surveys can be done without you visiting the classroom. You can get certain types of data from a survey that you would not get if the only thing you did was go to classrooms, because a survey allows you to get thoughts and opinions and experiences from hundreds and hundreds of people who do this. Whereas I just simply don't have the time to visit hundreds and hundreds of classrooms every year. The type of we do a lot of surveys. I think there are maybe 4 surveys that I put out on a regular basis. One of the things that I've been lucky enough to do is work with the Texas Education Agency on supporting their efforts in blended and personalized learning. And so teachers throughout the state, as part of this program, fill out surveys on their experiences with blended and personalized learning. Leaders, we have complete revision and reflection surveys about their experience trying to build and scale and sustain blended and personalized learning programs. In another area of my research, I also do things like Delphi technique. So you send out surveys to experts in the field and you get their thoughts on a particular phenomenon. And it's an iterative process where you're honing in through repeated sort of iterations on the survey questions, getting experts' opinions on a particular phenomenon having to do with blended and personalized learning. The most recent one we're doing is on what does it look like to continue to sustain blended and personalized learning in an innovative space after 5 years of implementation. But I also need to be able to understand what's going on and hear from teachers individually. So I do lots of interviews and focus groups and observations. And a lot of that means I'm in classrooms talking to teachers. I'm going to schools and talking to principals. I'm meeting with district leaders and talking to them about their experience implementing this in their school. So all of that is important. They're just different types of data, but that bringing all these types of data together really, I think, gives you a better picture of what's going on.
Yeah, and I think too, like with especially surveys, one of the things that's really important, especially in personalized learning and agency and co-creation is, yeah, take these surveys, but then these people that are doing as such, educators, things, they need to see
Yep.
how it affects, like what that actually, having an aha moment where you give a student in one of your classrooms at the university, a survey at the beginning to understand who they are as a learner, and then all of a sudden 6 weeks later they get a lesson that's very keyed to them, or very a project that's very key to them. They have that aha moment of like, oh, that's why we did that in the beginning. I don't see that happening a lot in schools. And one of the things that you said that is so true is, you introduce personalized learning, you introduce blended learning. There has to be these kind of, I'm trying to think of the word, prophets of this, if you will, that are pushing it forward, that are consistently being those thought leaders at your school, those innovators at your schools that are pushing this forward. And what ends up happening, what I've seen, you mentioned personalized learning becoming a one-on-one with a device. And that very much happened in the county that I live in now. And the only way I do see a shift is that it is consistent and that it is constant and that it never fails and it just keeps going, because you still have 40-year-old or 40-year tenured teachers saying, I'm never going to do it this way. And that's the problem in a lot of ways, because you're not engaging kids in a way that they need to be engaged, because kids have changed. The world has changed. So Talking about that, would you say that's one of the reasons why you're kind of still visiting, teachers, things like that, to learn how is this looking now? 5 years ago is 5 years ago.
Yep.
How is this looking now, and how are these outcomes? And let me ask you this: how are these looking now, and have those outcomes become, in your opinion, better for
Mhm.
learners over time?
Yeah, all great questions. Well, and I will say this too. I do visit schools and I wear my researcher hat. I'm here for an observation. I'm here to try and learn, what does this look like? How did this go? There are also times where I visit schools because I I've seen the research. I believe in blended and personalized learning. I work with an agency that has put together resources for blended and personalized learning. I work for a university that has resources for blended and personalized learning. And going to someone's classroom or someone's campus and literally just sitting down and talking with them and understanding where they're coming from is not just about research, it's also about buy-in, right? And
Yes.
I think from those conversations, I have learned that even the teacher that has been there for 40 years and just does not want yet another thing that got rolled up by the district and will probably disappear in 2 years to trip them up. They're like, I've seen it all. Here's yet another latest thing. I just don't have time to do the latest thing that I suspect will be gone in another 2 years anyway. And these are still teachers that care about their kids, right? I want to be
Sure.
clear. I have a real soft spot for just teachers. They do hard work. And so I have found that a lot of times it really is important to just be there talking to teachers so you can also understand their barriers. So you can understand, is it that you just don't feel like you have the time and capacity to learn more about digital technology? Or is it that you don't want to take the time to have something that you think is going to be done in 2 years? Or is it that, look, what you're doing right now, you feel like works just fine? All of those are legitimate barriers. So being able to have conversations about, well, hey, let's go look at so and so's classroom to see how it's done. If you can convince teachers that this is better for their kids in general, they will bend over backwards to do it. But it's getting
Amen.
to that point where they can see that it's better for their kids. So we do a lot of classroom visits with teachers on that. So I guess I just wanted to stress, yeah, it's important to go and see what's going on now. It's also important to be um, part of the group that supports teachers as they learn what's going on now. And I
Just as,
think, yeah, I was gonna
yeah,
say, I
no,
think you
just
asked a
as,
different part of the question too, but now I've forgotten it.
no, 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 it's fine. I think you're calling out kind of that similarity. We're all learners.
Yeah,
One of the things my daughter said to me one time when I was deeply apologizing for something I regretted as a younger man, she said, Dad, it was your first time at life too. And I
yeah,
said, wow, that's super insightful, because these are learners too. The one thing I would say that is the biggest barrier, I think, ultimately, to implementation of innovation in classrooms, as well as personalized learning and blending, is pride and ego. These kind of two things that don't serve education well, in my opinion, in any sense. Because if we're trying to teach lifelong learning to students, and we're sitting here as non-lifelong learners saying, I've got the way,
yep.
it just doesn't work. It doesn't translate well. So with that, I'm going to pivot in, because we've got about 10-ish more minutes. We have a question that we ask everybody, and this question helps, one, in part for me personally to understand, and then two part is research into what we're doing. Um, I will ask you, Doctor, what is SMART?
Yeah, it's such a good question. And it's probably no surprise, given my background in research and personalized learning, that I will say it's several things, and
Yes.
can be varied. Sometimes it's about quickness, right? How quickly can you come to an understanding of something? Can you deduce or induce, what the issue is, and then devise a solution to go forward? Sometimes it's about
Mm.
slowness. How can you hold yourself back when others are jumping to conclusions so that you can think about, well, what are we not considering? What other types of data do we need? Sometimes it's about, your ability to navigate as an insider in a system. I see a problem, and really the smartness comes into play when you have figured out how to identify a problem and navigate solutions to those problems while also being confined by the guardrails or barriers within the system in which you exist. Sometimes it's about being an outsider. Sometimes it literally is about trying to be able to say, I can take a step back and now have a different vision or understanding of what is going on in a system. So, I mean, I think that smart is such an interesting word because I think it tends to encompass more than just intelligent, and it tends to encompass much more than just an understanding. I think we really are getting at something that says, what can you do in a way that is different than maybe the norm, right? Like that's why we call people out as smart. But it's so varied depending on the person and depending on the context. So yeah, lots of different ways to be smart. Quick, cultivated slowness, cultivated understanding of how to do things within systems, as well as cultivated understandings and practices of how to step out and try and take a different perspective.
Man, as you were talking, I was thinking like smart is a lifelong lesson in duality, right?
Yeah.
Like there's this, because you're so right. For the same reason, someone really inside the box can make a lot of gains. Someone outside the box is going to make just as many contextually. One of a couple of explanations for you that go on to your point. One is I had a gentleman on the podcast who said smart is your proficiency in something that makes you happy. And I was like,
Hmm.
that's super interesting. And then Dr. Damian Bevel said one of my favorites, although that was up there, is smart is contextual and it's evolving.
Mm-hmm.
And you're saying the same thing, but I love the aspect of pointing out, and I'm always thinking about, right, like this is why this is research is I'm always thinking about how I can take what I've learned from experiences like this, conversations like this, and apply them to try and reach people better, to try and reach, for me, parents,
Mm-hmm.
stakeholders. Like,
Mm-hmm.
how do we get them to understand that someone, it makes me want to take what you said and make it super granular so that parents can see and experience like, oh, this person is super smart in this area and this
Right.
person is super smart in that area, and those are two very different things that if you flip-flop them, another thing that was said to me is, someone could have every degree, every bit of, and then you put them in the wilderness alone, and all of a
Yep.
sudden with a bushman from that area, now all of a sudden who's smart? You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yep.
And again, these are the kinds of conversations that I think overall need to happen, and they need to happen more, and the visibility needs to happen where people are paying attention and understanding that, the world is changing. We are at a deficit in our schooling system in how we approach learners, but folks just like you are out there doing that formative work, that future forward work to adapt and adjust that. And, from someone that's been in this for a very long time, 15 years in personalized learning in general, seeing that some of the ideas we speak of now that are in schools, when I was talking about them a long time ago, seemed crazy. You can
Yeah.
see 15 years later, these things aren't crazy for the same reason 15 years from now, we'll be talking a very different conversation. I very much think so, where not only is the world going to inform that change, right? Because there's going to be no question on things like AI and, the bigger questions and problems we're going to have to solve. But ultimately, someone that can memorize information, and
Yeah.
that's their only skill,
Right.
right? And we see that all the time. I mean, how many people do you see get out of school that have straight A's, awesome, and then go and work as a bartender because they can't apply it? They can't
Yeah.
understand how to like take that into the world. And I almost look at my path of not going directly to college after high school as a benefit against a lot of these people because I got real world education super quick. So anyway, thank you so much. We're going to wrap up the podcast there, Heather. And, again, what the work that you guys are doing, when I initially contacted Heather, it was very much centered around the teacher training. We feel that that's such an important part to change overall. And so we're super gracious here at What is Smart for the work that you do. We'd love for you to join us when we do a summit soon, where we're going to have tons of people that we've talked to on the podcast together in one room, fielding some really interesting big questions and learning from each other. I think that'll be a really awesome thing. We'd love to have you there. Is there anything else? Where can people find you? Do you have personal brand stuff that you're doing or
Yeah,
anything that
well,
we
and
can
if
point
people
to?
want to know more, for sure, go to Texas Tech University. In fact, you can just Google Texas Tech University
We'll put
Blended
it
and
up here.
Personalized Learning. Absolutely. That will take you to our website. You'll be able to see our framework. You'll be able to understand a lot of the resources that we've already developed in teacher training. And then obviously you can go to my website that's associated with Texas Tech. But thank you so
Awesome.
much. I'm so excited about the continuation of this work.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. And like we're doing the hard work here, and hopefully over time, the 15 years I spoke about, 15 years from now, I'll personally be a really old guy with some gratitude in my heart for the work that we've all done. So thanks again, Heather. And yeah, we'll see you next time on What is Smart.
Thanks.